victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal have been told that they can be swiftly exonerated and compensated under a new law to be introduced by the Tory government.
Rishi Sunak yesterday described the scandal as one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our nation's history. The Prime Minister announced an upfront payment of £75,000 to many of those affected. In the studio with us, Chief Political Correspondent at the Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Aubrey, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is incredible, isn't it, that for 24 years, nearly quarter of a decade, this scandal has been at root. And finally, the drama beginning of this year sheds a light on it. And when there is political will, things can change pretty quickly.
That's certainly true. I don't think it's a coincidence that we've seen such a sort of groundswell of support amongst the public for these postmasters and postmistresses, and then seen ministers act so quickly. Undoubtedly, there have been people working diligently, quite hard in the background, but often not kind of getting the time, space, energy and support behind them to be able to kind of bring the full force of this compensation package and the pardons forward as quickly as possible. It is an election year, so no doubt political leaders are feeling the heat and needed to be seen to act swiftly. But there will be questions asked of the leaders of all three political parties about why it took this long.
And I think you said something earlier, Rosie, which is so relevant. It's the small person, isn't it, taking on the conglomerate or the government. And shame on them. If it is, maybe we're cynical, if it is because it's election year. 24 years, as Rosie says, right? And we've sat here for the last 3 days and followed this, right? And we're not just talking about money. I want to keep making this point. These people were ostracised and humiliated in their communities, people who'd worked hard all their lives. Some were so consumed by the horrors they took their own lives. Many died of natural causes, unable to prove their innocence before they died. I want to talk about this exoneration before I talk about compensation. Yesterday we were sat here and I was very vocal saying, you know what, this should just be a completely a cross-party thing, bring in the law, forget the House of Lords, done. But it was pointed out to me overnight, of course, there's a difference in our democratic system between, you know, an elected government and the legal system. We spoke to Joshua Rosenberg this morning, a legal commentator, who said some people might want their day in court, Aubrey. Others might want to just forget about this because it's been so traumatic. And so it is fraught with danger the next few weeks. And also, what I didn't know, I don't know about you, Rosie, there might be people who are guilty, I was told earlier, which also adds something else to the mix.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons this has become so complicated. And you have sort of legal experts, I think the former Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, among those, saying today that it's very difficult to sort of, almost if you say that everyone's innocent, you then tar people who absolutely were innocent and you put them in the same category as those very, 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 very small number of people who aren't.
Do we know?
That's not what they want.
I wouldn't listen to Dominic Grieve if you pay me money, but are you, a genuine question to anybody who can answer this, do we know of the 700 people who have been treated so appallingly, do we know if people are guilty?
The thing is, we don't know.
No.
That's why some people are saying, I want a court to say, no, you have been found innocent. What they want is the front page of the photograph instead of the papers. Instead of saying guilty, they want to say this person declared innocent. And for them, for some of those people, having a piece of paper and signing to say, right, I didn't do this, doesn't quite give them the justice that they want. But the solution that the government come up with seems to be what they can quickly decide is the best compromise, so the most number of people get some form of justice.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what ministers have basically said is you will have to sign a statement of innocence, and that basically says, I'm innocent, I didn't do the things I'm accused of, and it means that those people, again, the very small number who might have done something wrong, can then, again, still be prosecuted if it's found at a later date that they did do something wrong and they wouldn't receive the full compensation
But without getting too deep, you would understand one of the things that struck me on Monday, Rosie, when we interviewed Tim, was when he said to us, you know, we were accused of this, right? So we knew we hadn't done it, but we were pressurised by barristers and the post office. So we raided our savings, myself and my parents, paid 22 grand to the post office, said, you know, we'd done this, and immediately they were prosecuted. I just think a lot of these people are rather reticent to sign any paper because they probably don't trust anybody in this process, which I get, don't you?
Completely. And there were lots of people who were encouraged to plead guilty, believing that it would shorten the sort of sentence that they might face. And so these people who admitted to their crimes but know that ultimately they didn't actually do them which makes the whole system even worse. And you can completely forgive these people for having a lack of faith in politicians' promises, because there have been many over the years, and in the legal system which they've gone through. The British legal system is supposed to be, you know, one of the best in the world, and yet there was this huge miscarriage of justice that went under everyone's eyes.
And this pain where they thought, you know, as soon as I just get in front of a judge and I tell the truth, they'll be on my side, and realise that system was against them. Aubrey, talk us through the really interesting position we find ourselves in now, where the UK government passed some legislation which, in effect, does the role normally we would expect a judge to do, and some lawyers are a little bit nervous that this could set a precedent. I think most people say that's very unlikely, and this is an extraordinary situation, where the government are being able to overrule criminal proceedings.
Yes, again, part of the fear was that this is the sort of action that's taken by a sort of authoritarian state. Politicians deciding they don't like the view of independent sort of judges who are implementing the law.
Yeah.
You know, the problem is the law, not the implementation of it, they would argue. And so the criticism really is that politicians are taking the law into their own hands and trying to sort of ride roughshod over the independence of the judiciary. Obviously, most ministers concede that this is really the sort of lesser of two evils. It's a difficult situation. This is ultimately what they have to do.
I understand how difficult this is going to be, but I won't stop saying what I'm saying about Sir Ed Davey. Here's my point. Paula Venables, the CEO, bowed to pressure, gave back a CBE 2 days ago. The press are now quite rightly pursuing her, I think, for £3 million worth of bonuses. Here's a bonus for doing a really good job. Oh, you destroyed 700 people's lives. Give us the money back. Every single, you said it, political party is mired in this. Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions. Cameron, Osborne, Theresa May gave her the damehood and the bonus system. But let me bring it to Sir Ed Davey, and I apologise if you don't like this. He has made a career, as have many Liberal Democrats, right, out of making people who are not the most upstanding in public life, right, be brought to task, be that Labour, be that Tory. Ed Davey has not been seen by anybody for 3 days. He's going to come, is he not, Aubrey, under massive pressure. Could lose his knighthood. And I have to say, didn't do anything as the Post Office. Ignored Alan Bates. Fact.
Certainly, there have been a sort of succession of Post Office ministers, and Ed Davey was one of them, starting in the 2010 coalition government. And there is that sort of infamous letter where he declined initially a meeting with Alan Bates, then later says he went on to have one. But he certainly will come under some pressure.
He should do.
He hasn't been seen in Parliament, or at least in the House of Commons chamber in recent days. We're told it's for personal reasons. However, if a select committee wanted to launch an inquiry into this, they have every right to summon him to give evidence as a former minister. Yeah. This will not be the last that we hear from him.
The public inquiry, the next stage into what happened and what went wrong at the Post Office, opens again today. Yeah. We've talked about compensation, Aubrey. What happens after that will be potentially criminal prosecutions, many different investigations to work out where this all went wrong, who is to blame. Who do you think, or which corporations, which businesses, which governments have got questions that they'll have to come and answer?
So, yeah, the public inquiry restarts today. It's the sort of fourth section in it, and it's going to be looking at the action that was taken against these post office workers. Now, I suspect there'll be lots of people called, but ultimately there will be a sort of fear that lessons will be learned, is the sort of you know, the sort of strange extrapolation that can be taken from the inquiry.
I think people will go to jail.
And people will be looking specifically for action against individuals, those who served on the Post Office board. Look
at this, Aubrey. Post Office handed out bonuses for convictions. You know, go and find me a guilty postmaster, ruin his life, and I'll give you £1,000. They're in it as well. There's so many people, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one of the sort of chief negotiators for the Post Office who's giving evidence today. He's been accused of saying to a Post Office worker during her interview, what are you wearing today? What's your jewellery? She gave him a description, and then he said, they know what to look for when they come for you. So there are lots of people who are being brought into this, not just executives, but investigators as well. Criminal prosecutions at the end of it shouldn't be ruled out.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it.